Welcome again to the Practical Enneagram. Michelle Wangler Joy is an Enneagram teacher and licensed marriage and family therapist who's been helping couples for almost 2 decades by combining the developmental model of couples therapy and the Enneagram. She's the only one out there doing this. This interview is rich with practical, actionable tips for each type in the challenging second phase of their relationship. Listen here for the distinctions Michelle makes between developmental change and behavioural change. Listen out also for her ways of speaking to types in their language, which I just think is an excellent example of how to use the Enneagram to support communication in a way that is of service, not manipulative. Finally, I want to mention Michelle's free PDF guide at couplesandtheenneagram.com because I just think it's really good. I hope that you enjoy this interview.
Yeah, I'm a marriage family therapist, and I've been specializing in really helping couples for almost 20 years. At the same time, I've been looking at couples' relationships also through the lens of the Enneagram. I trained in something called the developmental model of couples therapy, which is really all about helping couples grow and develop. I discovered the Enneagram about 25 years ago. I've really come upon some common patterns and tendencies that I see that couples in relationships struggle with, and I've seen kind of the area of growth that's needed and what helps them grow. So I just have a lot of passion for what I do. On a personal note, man, when I discovered my Enneagram type, it was just so life-changing for me. I'm a type 4. I thought, oh, wow, so I'm not deficient. There's nothing wrong with me. It was really an eye-opener. And this is something I'm telling myself. It's not really reality. And it was really, really helpful. So I've been a student of it ever since. I know some people, it's a journey for them to discover their type. For me, it was a bullseye as soon as I read. And, it was my sister who showed me a book and she said, here, read this type. I think sounds like this person. And I read it and it was me to the T. But I had that background as I started college and as I started, studying how to help couples too. So I brought that knowledge with me. And then I became a certified Enneagram teacher later on as well.
Was it the Enneagram Institute?
It was the Narrative Tradition with David Daniels and Helen Palmer. Yeah.
Massive asset in so many ways for the Enneagram to have come in that early in life. So the developmental model of couples therapy, I'd love to know what that is.
So the developmental model was created by Dr. Ellen Bader and Peter Pearson of the Couples Institute in Menlo Park. And they were really 2 pioneers of creating couples therapy in the first place. But their model is really all about growth and development. It talks about 5 stages that couples pass through once they get together. And those 5 stages actually mirror what we have been through in early human development. So in other words, as a child, as a baby, we're born, we go through these 5 stages. And then when we get into a relationship, we start all the way over from the beginning with our partner and we go through these stages again. A lot of couples get stuck in stage number 1 and they don't know it. So it doesn't matter how long they've been together. I'm really helping couples with stage 2, and I'll talk about what that means. And by the way, as a couples therapist, I don't ever see couples that come in because they're happy, right? So what I'm going to be talking to you about is couples that are not happy. So when the Enneagram type is in their stress, I'm going to talk about what I have noticed and what I see.
Stage 1 that most couples get stuck at, can you sort of flesh that out a bit more now, what that is?
Yeah, that's called symbiosis. Some people refer to it as the honeymoon phase, but when a couple first gets together and they see all their similarities, they don't really see their differences at that point. It's an important stage because it forms a solid bond for falling in love with each other. But they're more inclined to kind of go along with things like, I don't know, what do you want? They're more inclined to maybe not be connected to what they want. And they say things like, you complete me, or we're one. And so there's this feeling like we are one. When you watch the movies, it looks like this stage lasts for 50 years, but it does only last for between 6 months and 2 years. So by the end of 2 years, the couple would be moving into stage number 2. And stage number 2 is called differentiation. And that is when couples start to notice their differences. And when I say differences, I don't mean one person likes this kind of food, the other likes that. I'm talking about, you were yelling. No, I wasn't. Yes, you were. No, I wasn't. Like, that's a difference in perception and perspective, and difference in experience. And that's when couples start to feel stressed out. So couples tend to handle that sort of crisis, if you will, in one of two ways. Either they will cave in and say, you know what, I'm going to say I don't have any needs so that you and I can be one, so that we can be in agreement. Just like we were in stage one, where we were one. I want to feel like I'm one. I don't want to feel like we're separate. Or a couple will say, you know what, you're wrong and I'm right. So if you were just more like me, we'd be okay. And that way they can be one again. They don't have to go through the anxiety of realizing that they're two separate people. And I know that sounds kind of odd, of feeling like we're two separate people, but sometimes when we're in a conflict, it comes across like we're the same. Like, you need to think like I do, or I'm going to cave in to keep peace so that we're one again. So anyway, I'll pause for a second to see if that made sense.
Perfect sense. So I recognize it in my personal experience, and I recognize my choice to go into option one of those two. So those are two sort of dysfunctional methods for addressing that disconnect that happens.
That's right. And when I work with couples, even if they've been together 30 years, a lot of us will skip over stage two, and it causes problems. So always when a couple needs help with something, I'm listening to the content of what they're saying, whatever the issue is, but I'm listening a lot more for how they're talking about it, because to me, that's really where couples get stuck, is the how. So are they caving in, or are they getting aggressive? And there's a continuum of each, right? But true differentiation there's two parts to it. Number one, there's differentiation of self. So in a relationship, we have to ask ourselves, to what degree do I bring myself forward? Do I say, here's who I am, here's what I think, here's what I feel, here's where I live inside, here's what matters to me, here's what my opinion is, here's what's important to me. Now, for some people, that's easier than others. Now, some people say what they think and feel, but it comes across in a critical tone, perhaps like a type 1. Or maybe somebody doesn't share of themselves because they don't want to start a conflict, like perhaps a type 9. Or perhaps somebody doesn't share their needs because they feel guilty that they have them in the first place, like a type 2. Or maybe somebody does say, here's who I am, here's what's important to me, but it comes across in a demanding, confrontational way, like a type 8. And so their message also gets lost in translation. So that's called self-differentiation. Mm-hmm. The second type of differentiation is called other differentiation. So when our partner comes to us and they're honest with us, they're transparent, they're saying, here's who I am, here's what's important to me, here's what I think, here's what I feel, here's my perspective, here's what my experience was. To what degree do we have the capacity to listen to them, to hear them, to stay connected, and get curious about them as a separate person from us, without getting defensive, without getting critical, without getting blaming, without shutting down, and without getting aggressive, but really like learning who they are, extending ourselves to their reality and seeing ourselves as separate. And this is so cool because often we think everybody sees the world the way we see it through our Enneagram lens. And so part of this work is seeing how my partner sees the world differently than I do, how they interpret it differently, etc.
So those two ways of successfully differentiating at stage 1, is that what you just described there? And
that would be stage 2, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, stage 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so that process, so one of those or both of those processes are what needs to happen at stage 2 in order for a couple to sort of traverse from 1 to 2 into 3.
And if they hop over stage 2, which a lot of us do because it's so stressful to do what I'm talking about for different reasons, it causes problems. Like there's symptoms that'll come up. The stronger their differentiation, the stronger their self-differentiation, the stronger their other differentiation, the better their communication, the stronger their conflict resolution, the more connected they're going to feel, the more depth they're going to have in their relationship, the more emotional intimacy they're going to have. So all of the things that couples want can often come from really developing themselves in that arena. in self and other differentiation. Now, the Enneagram, it colors and it influences or shapes where a person gets stuck with either self differentiation or other differentiation. But I do want to say that, every Enneagram type has a core belief, which is the root. And then to me, that root grows branches. So the analogy I want to say is that I think the personality structure of our type can manifest itself in an infinite number of ways in relationships. So what I'm going to be talking about today is not black and white, the end all be all. These are just some examples that are common from what I've seen. But there's lots more, examples that come from the same root.
I can't wait to get to these patterns that you've noticed. And it's just a lingering question over, how does it look, Michelle, if people skip stage 2 into stage 3? What is stage 3 and how does that even go if they've skipped or done a partial job with stage 2? Yeah.
Stage 3 is called practicing. And that's when a couple goes from a we to an I. And it doesn't mean they're growing apart necessarily, but it's more like, hey, what about me? Like, what are my hobbies? What are my interests? I've always wanted to go back to school, for example. So when a couple does proper differentiation, what stage 3 looks like is, hey, dear partner, here are my interests. Here's what I'm thinking. But I know we're in a relationship. So let's talk about how this is going to affect you and what can we do to work together on this. So the couple stays bonded. But if a couple does it in a partial way, like you said, or they jump over it completely, what stage 3 looks like is, here's what I'm doing. I don't really know what you're doing. And a couple can feel like they live on 2 separate islands. And they come in and they go, we've been together for 10 years or whatever, and we've grown apart. We were roommates in the house.
Definitely happened to me at least once. Okay, so now I know what's going on there. Should we do the type tour? Are you down for it to do the type tour in how each type gets stuck and what their sort of maybe one key practice or one helpful practice they can use for moving to differentiation?
Yeah. Is it okay if I start with type 8?
Yeah.
I'm used to doing the body types and then the heart types and then okay. Type 8s, and this is under stress. This is not every type. So type 8s can come across when they're communicating with their partner in a way that's confrontational, demanding, aggressive. And they tend to not share their vulnerabilities. They can be more comfortable saying, I'm angry, I'm pissed off, but not so much that hurt my feelings or that scared me or that made me sad. And sometimes 8s do, say those vulnerable feelings, but I've seen so many times where they don't. And so they're kind of blocking their partner out from understanding them. And by the way, I want to say this because to me, this was very interesting. I have probably asked thousands of people now, tell me about your upbringing, tell me about your family of origin, because that's what I do whenever I see a couple or an individual client. I ask them about their upbringing. And what I've noticed is it's not what has happened to people. It is how the person perceived it that lends itself to their Enneagram type. For instance, I met with a type 8 the other day. He said, I grew up with 2 conflict avoidant parents, both of them very soft, didn't bring anything up. That's why I'm a type 8. Somebody in the family had to be strong. So I stepped up to the plate, and that's why I'm the challenger. I'm an 8. But then a week later, I had another client that said the exact same thing. I had 2 parents that were very soft. They didn't have any conflict. That's why I'm the peacemaker. I'm the 9. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting to me. And when I listen to people's upbringings, I kind of listen to their perspective on that. But anyway, so a lot of 8s say, I was bullied as a kid. I'm not going to let that happen to me. There's some kind of experience of how they were taken advantage of. So be damned if I'm going to let that happen again. So they're hiding that part of themselves, right? They don't think it's safe. And it wasn't safe at one point in their life. They can also come across to their partner like, my word is law. What I think is right. Here's what you should do. The other day I had a type 8 say to me, shouldn't my partner want to hear what I have to say? Shouldn't they want my advice? And then his partner said, when he thinks he's right, it just limits his perspective and I feel abandoned. So that can be a blind spot for 8s. What they want to do instead is work on not saying their truth, of course, to say their truth, but to say it in an assertive way and to begin to express their vulnerabilities. to begin to own that part of themselves again. Because like part of our Enneagram type is we start to deny parts of ourselves that we learned that we had to when we were a kid. So begin integrating those back in. So that's one tip. Another one is to ask their partner what feels supportive. So when the type 8 said to me, shouldn't my partner want my support? Shouldn't they want me to tell them what to do? And I said, why don't you ask your partner what feels supportive to them? And they turned to him and said, okay, what feels supportive? And their partner said, give me space, give me appreciations and something else. And it was and the 8 looked at me and said, those are the exact hardest things for me to do. And I was like, that's the beauty of relationships. And I was thinking, and it's the beauty of the Enneagram too, because our partner pulls on us for growth, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's type 8. So in terms of 9s, their self-differentiation is they have a reluctance of bringing themselves forward. They have a reluctance of advocating for themselves and saying, here's who I am, here's what I think, here's what I feel. They're more apt to keep it to themselves and just go along to get along. So speaking of, let's be one, they are the type that says, I will merge with you so that we can be one, Type 9 the other day said, it's just easier if I go along with it. If I say what I think and feel, it's just going to cause a fight. So that's kind of repressed anger, right? After a while, you get angry that you feel like you have to keep doing that. And then on the other side, in terms of the other differentiation, they will quickly merge with their partner once they hear their partner's truth. And if their partner is saying something to them, like their partner's defining and saying, here's a conflict I'm having with you, dear 9. Sometimes the 9 can dig in their heels or minimize it or glaze over it if it's not conducive to peace or harmony. They'll just try to not do anything with it because it gets to be uncomfortable. So what they want to do instead is really develop that internal muscle of bringing themselves forward. Sometimes in a relationship, a 9's like, the solution is just for my partner to get off my back and leave me alone. But then they're missing all the growth. So their growth of a 9 is to do what's uncomfortable, bring themselves forward, say, here's what I think and feel. And when their partner disagrees, to not let go of it quickly. I notice that when 9s first start practicing that, as soon as their partner disagrees, they let go. So it's like, no, wait a minute. Like, are you really okay with letting your perspective go? And then to ask questions of their partner is designed to explore the conflict, and it's going to feel uncomfortable. This is where the developmental piece comes in. It's really about learning how to manage discomfort. Can I say something quick about development?
Yeah, please.
Okay, in a relationship, there's a behavioral change, and then there's a developmental change. So a behavioral change is like taking out, I don't know, like doing the dishes is a behavior, and it's something we can go and do. It's measurable. Or like if I was to say to you, Rez, like raise your right hand right now, you could do it without much effort. That's behavioral request. But developmental is, for example, type 9, speak up, say what you think and feel. All of a sudden, that's not behavioral. That's not so easy to do. We can't just go do it. There's an internal struggle. There's an internal, it's difficult. There's a muscle that needs to get developed. So as a therapist, I sit with these couples and hold them in that tension. And when I see the 9 get out of it, I'm like, wait, come back. What's it like that you just told your partner what you felt and they disagree with it? Or like, what are you feeling right now? And kind of walk them through that discomfort to help strengthen that muscle. And always on the other side of this is the reward. They just can't see it. Like for the 8, I said, what's it like now that you're sharing yourself with your partner? He said, I feel closer. 9s feel like they're coming out of their shell. They feel more alive and, feeling like they don't have to just go along with everything.
To just sort of emphasize what you just said there about muscles, that means it takes time, right? It's not going to be like an overnight process.
It's a capacity and it's a process that gets strengthened over time.
And then the other differentiation practice that you identified for 9s there, was that around having more curiosity about the partner's experience and being with the discomfort of that?
Yeah, I'm fresh in this one because this happened the other day where somebody said, I told my partner, who is a 9, I told him what I was feeling, and he just said, it'll be okay. Or, you could just kind of change the subject. And she's like, I don't want that. I want him to embrace my emotions and to talk with me about it and to sit with it and to not want to move through it so quickly. And especially if it has to do with the 9, they just get uncomfortable and don't quite know what to do. But I also heard a 9 say, I thought this was really poignant. He said, if I really listen to my partner and I really hear them, it might mean that I'm going to have to change my behavior, and I don't want to have to change my behavior. But the piece that was missing was he didn't feel like he had the capacity or a choice to say, well, hey, that doesn't work for me or something. It was just, I'm going to hear that I need to change and I'm going to have to do it. So there's a blind spot. You don't really have to, but you can talk about it and bring yourself forth in that conversation. But that's a blind spot sometimes. It doesn't feel like an option.
Maybe we should move to the ones.
Yeah. So type 1s, in terms of the self-differentiation, I've heard one say, when I talk to my partner, I can, in terms of my emotions, I can have an emotional tightness. I like that phrase that a 1 used recently in terms of expressing themselves. Not all 1s that come in, but very, very commonly when they come in as a couple, it's usually the one who's annoyed with their partner in some way. Their partner's not doing something right. They're not following through. They're not being an effective team. They're doing something kind of halfway, partial. And then the 1 is so burdened, like they can't let go of it. They have to have it in their mind. They feel like they've got to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they call it a crushing burden. I've heard 1s use that term before. And then there's resentment of that. So when they talk to their partner, it comes across in a critical or judgmental way. You need to do this. Why don't you do that? And what they're wanting is a change of behavior. They're wanting their partner to understand them and to change their behavior, but it almost never happens because their partner, like I said earlier, is too busy feeling scolded. So it's a mutual problem of empathy. Neither person understands each other in that way. They also don't tend to share their authentic feelings with their partner. Instead, it comes across, I call it a critical parent way. Like a critical parent is you should, you always, you never. And the partner in the receiving end can feel like a child, like they're being condescended or talked down to. And part of the complaint of a 1 is often, why am I the parent in this marriage? How I thought we were 2 adults and now I'm the parent and you're the child. I feel like I've got 3 kids or whatever. But part of that is because the 1 speaks to their partner in a parental way and they don't know it. They don't know that that is part of the problem. So part of their work is, I'm just going to make up an example. Instead of saying, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, of saying, hey, when you help me with this, here's what I feel inside. I feel like I matter to you. I feel like you care about me. I feel lighter. I feel like I can relax. So thank you. Sometimes 1s say, why should I give my partner a pat on the back? Why should I praise them and say, atta girl or atta boy, when this is something that I do myself and I do it all along? That's a parental thing. That's what parents do to kids. So no, let's do adult to adult. And adult to adult is giving them data about you. Like, when you do this thing, here's how it makes me feel. That's very different than atta girl, like a parental thing. So I'm trying to get them out of critical parent into adult, which is a blind spot. To them, the solution is their partner needs to start changing, but they don't see their side of it. In terms of differentiation of other, the way I see things is common sense. So why would I even explore what my partner thinks or feels or how they want to do something? So the work of a type 1 is to see their partner as different instead of wrong. Like they have 2 different approaches with it, and to begin to explore their partner. Sometimes the partners of 1s feel like, I can't do anything right, or I don't really have a place here because, he or she just takes over and I'm not going to do it right anyway. So we'll go on to 2 next. So when 2s express themselves to their partner, again, it can come across in many, many different ways. Some 2s come across as demanding because I've met your needs, now you got to meet mine. But some 2s don't say what their needs are because they just feel like they shouldn't have them, or that core belief that they all have. And sometimes they can expect reciprocation from their partner instead of really, I'm going to do this for you and then you'll respond. And I've heard 2s say, like, I'm setting up a genuine reciprocity. If I'm giving to you, why wouldn't you want to give back to me? But see, they can create a story about their partner. Like, they're not giving back to me because I don't matter enough or they don't care about me. So the story they create is not true other differentiation. I always ask people, ask your partner, like, yes, they didn't do that thing. That's true. But will you point blank ask them if it's true that they don't care about you or that you don't matter? And every time when they ask, their partner's like, of course not. I care about you a lot. You matter a lot. Okay, well then why else might your partner not be reciprocating? So then the two starts to be like, they don't see it the way I do. They have a completely different lens than I do. I'm giving, but when they don't give back, that doesn't mean A, B, and C about them. So they're beginning to see their partner outside of the lens of their Enneagram type, which does lead to a more growth in their relationship when they can do that. So part of their work is to, get in touch with their needs, the more authentic part of themselves, their authenticity, and to share that with their partner. A two I know was really coming across like, look at all the things I've done for you, and now it's time for you to give back. And I said, how about you try experimenting with, don't say all the things you've done, just say, here's what I need, and leave it at that. And that was very uncomfortable for this person. But see, this is the development part. This is where the growth is. This is the internal muscle we have to develop to get used to doing that. Another thing is, a two I know said, the only reason my partner listens to me is because I'm meeting his needs. And see, that kind of perception about her partner is through her Enneagram lens. You hear that, right? So I said, why don't you ask him if that's why he's listening to you? So I like to turn these Enneagram assumptions into a question of their partner, so they can get used to inquiring into their partner instead of making assumptions through this lens.
That's so good. Yeah. There's a question bubbling up about instincts. Shall I wait until the end, until we've got through to the end about that? I just want to know how that affects these. I'm guessing these patterns would be common to all three of the subtypes or instinct types, but let's leave it for the end and move to the threes if you're cool with that.
Sure. Sometimes threes can avoid sharing who they really are. They're, because threes identify with kind of an image, and their true self gets kind of put on the wayside. I'm just going to give you an example, a real example. A three said to me, I want my partner to sit closer to me. I want them to be near me. And she kept telling her partner, here's what you need to do. You need to do this, this, and this. You need to come sit near me. And I said, why don't you ask your partner, like in real time, why don't you ask your partner to come sit with you? And we did it in a really slowed down way. It's really hard for threes to slow down. And she said, it's hard for me to show him the real me, like the vulnerable side of me. It's hard for me to show him. Like I always come across like I have it all together, like I'm competent. So I really coached her and saying, like, I want you to sit close to me sometimes. Threes can come across sometimes as identifying with a certain image, whatever that looks like. That can come up in an infinite number of ways. But also, they go right to solution, usually. When I meet with threes, they usually want to know, tell me the steps. Here's our problem. What is the solution? And that can lead to a lack of emotional depth sometimes in a relationship. It can lead to the partner not feeling understood. So I tell threes often, let's stay away from the solution for now. We're not going to talk about what to do. We're going to talk about how to be, which is a blind spot for threes anyway. They'll go, what do you mean how to be? And I'll say, you want to be present. You want to be connected to your partner. You want to be curious. You want to be compassionate. You want to be empathetic. Be right now. And let's put the solution off the table. So when we bring that into the relationship, oftentimes the partner's like, I feel more connected to you. I feel closer to you. I'm not even angry about this other thing anymore. It was more the lack of reaching you that was the problem that I'm realizing now. A three that I met with recently said, if I can't see the solution, I get tunnel vision. I almost start to panic. Like I have to see the solution. So this is the internal muscle for threes to exercise. And I use their language. Sometimes it can feel like wasting time to do the being part, but I'll use their language and say it's very productive to be. You're not wasting time. And the way it's productive is these are the things you're going to build in your relationship if you be with your partner. And I'll say, isn't that right, dear partner? Yes, that's true. So then they'll see how it's productive and they can begin to slow down and exercise that muscle of being with their partner before problem solving. And it leads to more effective conflict resolution anyway, if they be first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's one more other differentiation piece I can say. This one, sometimes when their partner tells them, here's what I'm upset about with regards to you and our relationship, or here's what I'd like to see change. Sometimes the threes feel like, I'm a failure or I'm messing up. and they defend against that. So they'll fight back and get defensive. No, I don't do that. You do. Or they'll, stand up for themselves instead of looking at it as a real opportunity to understand their partner better. Now, sometimes 3s say, well, I love constructive feedback. But on the other hand, I don't always see them take that in. I see them get defensive because they don't want to feel like they're failing in the relationship. So that's the work for a 3 is to manage their defensiveness and explore what their partner is saying, not making it about them as a failure, but what can I learn about my partner? And can I tell them that I get them and I hear them? It's the being part.
That's a huge practice. Any 3 that does that work that's really important work that would have effects across life, right? Not just in relationships, but
yeah.
Should we move to our type?
Sure. So, and again, this is under stress. So sometimes when 4s communicate with their partner, they can come across over-identified with their emotions, over-identified with their feelings. And sometimes it can be a feeling of a victim, like you wronged me. When they're in that stance, it is so hard to see where their partner's coming from. They're missing the big picture, the objectivity, where it's like my partner's probably suffering too, but there's a lack of inquiring into what they're going through because 4s can get really locked into, I was wronged. And sometimes 4s can also get locked into, they might ridicule their partner or test them and say, are they gonna like come after me if I just storm off kind of thing. And there tends to be a lack of extending themselves to their partner's reality and saying, tell me why you hurt, or tell me what I'm doing and how I'm impacting you. It can be a blind spot. And 4s can often interpret their partner's behavior through, if I mattered to you more, then you would do A, B, and C. Like the other day, a 4 said, I'm asking my partner to text me when they're at work. They're not doing it. It must mean that I don't matter to them. So again, I said, would you turn that into a question and point blank ask your partner whether or not you matter to them? She's like, yeah, of course you matter to me. So again, turning those into a question helps with the differentiation piece. Well, then if I matter to you, then why are you now it's the inquiring part of their partner where they're trying to see their partner outside of the lens of their Enneagram type. And the partner was able to explain it has nothing to do with you. It's not personal. That's another thing is 4s tend to take things very personal. It like absorbs right into them and it means something about them. And it kind of confirms deficiency or defectiveness sometimes, or it gets in touch with that shame part. And along those same lines, sometimes 4s have a hard time sharing they want to be authentic, but at the same time, sometimes there's an internal conflict because what if I share who I really am and this person, I'm going to show them what's wrong with me, so to speak, quote unquote. So sometimes there's a holding back in that regard as well.
Mm-hmm. With the self-differentiating and the other differentiating, is it that some types will be naturally better with the self aspect and not so good at the other? Because
I think so. Generally, I won't say 100% across the board, but for instance, we can say that a type 8 maybe is better at saying what they think and feel than they are at maybe bringing in and embracing what their partner truly thinks and feels at their core and what's supportive to them. Maybe a 9 is more natural at listening to their partner than they are at saying what their truth is. So yeah, I think there's tendencies like that for these types.
Even the self-differentiating that I think I'm doing as a 4 is probably limited in some way by my type, isn't it? Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. That's very true.
Okay, let's do head types.
Okay, type 5. Type 5s, in terms of self-differentiation, they often tend to not bring things up. Sometimes relationship talk feels awkward or uncomfortable, or they don't quite know the words to use. If their partner brings something up that has to do with the relationship, the 5 tends to not say anything or freezes up, or needs a lot of time to process, which is fine. It's totally fine to need a lot of time to process. But sometimes 5s will withdraw and then they just don't come back with the topic. They just stay away, which drives their partner nuts. If the 5 was to bring themselves forward and say, I hear what you're saying, partner, number 1. Number 2, I care about what you're saying. Number 3, I don't know what to say. I have to think about it and I will come back to you when I'm ready. And to keep their partner posted, like, I didn't forget. I'm still thinking about it. I know it's day 2, but I'm still chewing on it. Then that is much better for the partner in terms of conflict resolution. So I always tell fives, it's okay if you don't feel competent or comfortable or you don't quite know what to say. Just kind of try to bring your internal thoughts out on the table. Say out loud what's going on inside of you. Because fives, what I've seen, they often get wrongfully accused of not caring because they don't say much. And 100% of the time, the fives I've talked with care a lot. They just don't know how to say it or what to say. So for me, all about fives is bringing themselves forward, both in how they speak to their partner and in how they listen to their partner, to engage with their partner, to ask curious questions, to show that they're interested, because sometimes fives don't. A lot of fives say, well, I don't want to be intrusive, so I'm not going to ask you questions. But that, again, comes across as not caring. So being more verbal about, and I said, well, tell your partner that you care, but you don't want to be intrusive. Don't like hold that in. Just tell them what you're thinking. Also, fives can jump right to problem solving too, and intellectualizing, and skipping over empathy, skipping over the, the exploration type of thing. So it's helpful for them to go into empathy. And I can say so much about empathy with fives, but I don't know that we have time.
There's some lovely content in your ebook about that I really loved. Yeah, a lot more to say about that people can seek you out for. And so are we done? So did we do the other differentiation practice? Yeah, we did, because fives jump to problem solving. Yeah, got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so 6, I see a lot of phobic 6s being very reluctant to share what they think and feel due to self-doubt. Gosh, if I say it, I can't take it back. Kind of their worst case scenario can come up with self-sharing. Counterphobic 6s are opposite. They'll just say it, and it can come across as aggressive and demanding, and they can look very 8-ish in that way. But in both cases, they're not being understood. In terms of other differentiation, I see it like it's through the lens of anxiety. I've seen 6s be like, oh my God, you did this. What else are you doing? They don't know what's true. They see a little kernel of truth, and it could just be that, or it could be all the way into something awful, and they don't know everywhere in between. I always ask 6s too, ask your partner questions so that you can land on something that feels more solid, so you don't feel like you're spinning and you don't have anything to hold on to. But it can be hard to believe their partner sometimes, especially if a 6 is paired up with a conflict avoidant type. Like sometimes conflict avoidant types will tell little white lies to keep peace. But for a 6, that can be very alarming. Like, what else are you hiding? 6s can also feel like if you're doing this now, like their worst case scenario, this is going to happen forever. And then they start to engage with their partner from that place. This is going to happen forever, and it's going to get worse. And then you're going to do this. And the partner on the receiving end can feel very, very misunderstood.
Developmental muscle there, Michelle, for 6s is not to...
It's managing their internal alarm to not, instead of projecting, which 6s do, is project their stuff onto their partner, project their fears onto their partner, to come into check and instead ask questions. So again, that takes them around their Enneagram type when they can do that. It's hard for 6s to sit still and to ask questions and to not project and to not bring in the worst case scenario. It feels like an unworried mind is unprotected, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that piece is seeing their fears as separate from their partner and trying to tease out, yes, here's the kernel of truth, but then where am I exaggerating it? And really getting interested and curious about that through exploring with their partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So 7, our last type.
The work of it. So sometimes 7s will be reluctant to initiate a conversation that I'll say is negative, something heavy, something that could have some hard emotions. They can have a hard time initiating it. I've heard some 7s say, I'm afraid I'm going to get stuck in it, or what is the point? There's so many other better things, better ways to spend my time than in this negative thing. And so they have a way of trying to rationalize their way out of things. Sometimes when their partner brings things up with them, I hear a lot of partners say things like, I'll bring something up and in some way they won't be present. They're distracted on their phone. They'll change the subject. They'll crack a joke. They'll tell me to look on the bright side. And in some way, I don't feel like my type 7 is sitting in this conflict with me long enough until we both feel like it's complete. So 7s often want to rush through it or minimize it or not stay with it long enough for both people to feel like it's complete. The other thing is sometimes the 7, when they speak to their partner, it can be very impulsive and quick. They'll just kind of blurt things out and say it without taking the time to slow down, sit with themselves, be thoughtful about how they say things. I've seen relationships get much better when a 7 can slow down and be more methodical and thoughtful about how they speak and slow down with it. I heard one 7 say, my way to a bright future is to not get stuck in conflicts. And he's like, why wallow in it? So then I said, well, consider that a bright future looks like going through the conflict, not around it. And that means going through to the point of completion. And he's like, well, she's always bringing it up. And I said, that's because it doesn't feel complete for her. So by going through it, and again, you can use their language, you're going to be free of it. And we have to go through it. A 7 is good for them to slow down and seek to understand rather than quickly rationalizing what their partner's saying away or getting uncomfortable or getting distracted, being willing to sit with the discomfort. Usually when I'm working with 7s, if I have a 7 that comes in and says, I'm working on being more present, I'm like, that's fantastic. Like they are doing their personal growth. So I'm helping them get more present when their partner's speaking to them and just stay with it, explore, and try not to hide behind optimism. Because sometimes 7s do say, oh, we're doing great. And the other partner's like, are you kidding me? Are we in the same relationship? So to be really willing to be honest and to know that on the other side of that is even more of what they're looking for. There's more freedom, there's more fun, there's more connected, their relationship will be better. Like that's all on the other side of working through their conflicts.
This is going to be a very rich interview for people, I feel. It has been for me. Do you have time to answer the niggly question about the effect of a person's instinct sequence on these sort of developmental muscles?
Yeah, so my perspective on that right now is that each Enneagram type has a core belief and they have a defense mechanism that comes up in the session regardless of their subtype. But to me, the way their subtype does show up in the relationship is it shows up in the content. So for example, a one-on-one subtype, sometimes the issue, the content, what they're talking about is, I want to spend more time together. So if you've got a one-on-one with a more maybe self-pres person, the argument, one person's priority is about safety, security. The other is more about spending time together. So they can butt heads on that. So it lends itself to the content and to the what, but then the how they talk about it, to me, goes back to what I like, some tips, some things that I just said, their coping mechanism, their outlook, their core belief. That's how I see it.
That makes total sense, that it would affect the content, but not the actual sort of practices and muscles.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just so lovely to speak with you and hear from you. And what's in the works other than the workshops? So you're going to be running courses or?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm offering workshops for couples therapists or coaches, and then workshops for couples who want to improve their communication and conflict resolution through the Enneagram. I am in the middle of writing a book. I'm about halfway through. So I hope to finish that by the end of this year.
Oh, that's so exciting. And is it on this? Is it on this subject?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I elaborate a lot. I'm going to elaborate lots more on this and some other things I didn't have time to get to today.
That's so great to hear. I look forward to that being out. The next chat is with Samantha Taroni, and we're going to be talking about how she supports people to connect with themselves using trees and tree wisdom. And she maps the Enneagram archetypes with trees, which I think is just really quirky and lovely.